I discovered my wife was stealing $25,000 from our joint account to support her secret family in another state. When I confronted her, she said I was being financially abusive. But then 2 months later, I got the sweetest revenge I never asked for. My world shattered last month when I discovered that my wife of 8 years had been living a complete double life behind my back. Sarah and I met in college, fell madly in love and built what I thought was a perfect life together. We had good careers, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and were finally talking about starting a family after years of focusing on our careers. I work as a financial analyst and Sarah is, or was, a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. Her job required frequent travel, sometimes for a week at a time, which I never questioned because it was simply part of her career. I was proud of her success and supportive of her ambitions. She worked hard to get where she was and I respected that. The revelation came when I was organizing our tax documents for the year. Sarah and I maintain a joint account for household expenses and separate accounts for our personal spending. We've always been transparent about finances, or so I thought. While reviewing our joint account statements, I noticed a pattern of large withdrawals over the past 2 years, always following her business trips to Arizona. At first, I thought nothing of it, maybe she was entertaining clients or had some work-related expenses, but the amounts were substantial, between $2,000 and $3,000 each time, and there were no corresponding reimbursements from her company. Over 2 years, these withdrawals added up to nearly $25,000. What made it stranger was that Sarah never mentioned these expenses. We regularly discussed our finances and budget together, yet these withdrawals never came up. My analytical mind couldn't let it go, so I decided to dig deeper. I checked our credit card statements and found recurring charges for a storage unit in Phoenix and regular purchases at grocery stores, children's clothing stores, and toy shops in the same area. There were even payments to a local elementary school. My stomach dropped. The evidence was pointing to something I couldn't even comprehend. Was Sarah supporting someone else? Another family? I felt sick just considering the possibility. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or accuse her without solid proof. I waited until she returned from her latest business trip to Arizona. When she got home, she was her usual self, affectionate, telling me she missed me, sharing stories about difficult clients and boring hotel rooms. That night after dinner, I calmly asked her about the withdrawals and the expenses in Phoenix. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Before she even spoke a word, her face drained of color, and for a moment she looked like she might pass out. "You've been spying on me?" she asked, immediately going on the offensive. I explained that I was preparing our taxes and noticed the pattern. It wasn't spying, it was managing our shared finances, something we'd always done together. After several attempts to deflect and change the subject, Sarah finally broke down. The truth was worse than anything I could have imagined. For the past 3 years, Sarah had been living a double life. She had reconnected with an old boyfriend from high school when her company first sent her to Phoenix. One thing led to another and they began an affair. 2 years ago, she discovered she was pregnant with his child. Instead of coming clean to either of us, she decided to maintain both relationships. She told him that she was divorced and working remotely, which explained why she could only be in Phoenix part of the time. Meanwhile, she told me her frequent trips were for work. The money from our joint account had been going to support her other family, paying for an apartment, childcare and living expenses for her, her lover, and their now 18-month-old daughter. I sat in shocked silence as she explained all this, unable to process the magnitude of her betrayal. 8 years of marriage and I didn't even know the woman sitting across from me. When I finally found my voice, I asked the only question that mattered. Why? Sarah's response left me even more stunned. She claimed she loved us both and couldn't bear to choose. She said she never meant to me, but she also couldn't abandon her child or her other relationship. She actually suggested that we could continue as we were, that I could just pretend I never discovered the truth. When I told her that was impossible and that our marriage was over, she became defensive. She accused me of being financially abusive, for monitoring the joint account and invading her privacy. She said I was being selfish and unfair for not understanding her complicated situation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had stolen from our joint savings, lived a complete life for years, had a child with another man, and somehow I was the villain in her story. That night, I moved into our guest room, unable to sleep beside the stranger who was my wife. The next day, I contacted a divorce attorney and began the process of untangling our lives. Sarah begged me to reconsider, saying we could work through this in therapy. When I remained firm in my decision, she changed tactics, to take me for everything in the divorce. She claimed that as the higher earner, I would owe her substantial alimony, and she would make sure to get half of everything we owned. It was like watching a mask fall away, revealing a person I'd never known. The loving, kind-hearted woman I married was gone, if she had ever existed at all. I moved out the following week, taking only my personal belongings and leaving her in the house for the time being. My attorney advised me not to make any drastic changes. While the divorce was being processed, Sarah continued her trips to Arizona, now not even bothering to maintain the pretense of business travel. The months since then have been a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and trying to rebuild some sense of normalcy. Friends and family were shocked by our sudden split, and I struggled to explain without revealing the full truth. But sometimes life has a way of delivering justice when you least expect it. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments on my original post. The past few months have been the hardest of my life, but knowing I'm not alone has been a tremendous comfort. It's been 2 months since I discovered Sarah's double life, and the divorce proceedings are well underway. Sarah initially tried to contest everything, demanding alimony despite her own substantial income, and fighting for half of all our assets, including family heirlooms that have been passed down to me from my grandparents. Through all this, I maintained a policy of strict no contact except through our attorneys. This seemed to infuriate her even more. She would send lengthy emails alternating between tearful apologies and vicious accusations. I forwarded everything to my lawyer without response. Last week, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered it. Was John Sarah's other partner from Arizona? "Is this Daniel?" he asked, his voice tense. When I confirmed, he took a deep breath and said, "I think we need to talk." John had discovered the truth about our situation not from Sarah coming clean, but through his own investigation after finding similar financial discrepancies in their shared expenses. Like me, he had started noticing large sums of money disappearing without explanation. When he confronted Sarah, she told him I was her abusive ex-husband who had been stalking her and demanding money to leave her alone. She claimed that's why she could only live in Phoenix part-time. She was afraid I would find her and their daughter if she settled there permanently. John was understandably skeptical of this story and did some digging. He found our wedding photos on social media and realized that the timeline didn't match what Sarah had told him. "We weren't exes, we were current spouses. I'm sorry to call you like this," he said, "but I thought you should know the full story. She's been lying to both of us." John revealed something even more shocking. Sarah had been taking money from him too, about $30,000 over the past 2 years, claiming it was for investments and savings for their daughter. But when he checked the accounts where this money was supposedly going, they either didn't exist or had minimal balances. We talked for nearly 2 hours, comparing notes and filling in gaps in each other's knowledge. John wasn't some random affair. He and Sarah had maintained an on and off relationship since high school. She had reached out to him about 4 years ago, claiming to be recently divorced and looking to reconnect. Their relationship progressed quickly, and when she became pregnant, he was overjoyed. "I've been raising our daughter while she's away on business," he said, the bitter irony evident in his voice. "Turns out her business was being your wife." By the end of our conversation, John and I had formed an unexpected alliance. We both agreed to share any information that might be relevant to either of us and to support each other through the legal proceedings that would inevitably follow. The very next day, John sent me copies of bank statements showing transfers from Sarah to unknown accounts, money that had come from both our household and his. He also sent screenshots of text conversations where Sarah had explicitly asked him for money for their daughter's education fund, a fund that, as far as we could tell, didn't exist. I immediately forwarded everything to my attorney, who was as surprised as I was by this turn of events. This new evidence significantly strengthened my case for financial in our divorce proceedings. But the real bombshell came 3 days later. John called again, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "She's gone," he said. "She took our daughter and disappeared." John had returned home from work to find their apartment cleaned out. Sarah had taken their daughter, all of her belongings, and anything of value from their home. She left no note, no explanation, just vanished. He had already filed a police report for parental and was working with authorities to locate them. Given that Sarah was the biological mother and there were no custody arrangements in place, the police weren't optimistic about classifying it as, but they agreed the situation was concerning. I immediately wondered if Sarah had fled to another secret life. Was there a third family somewhere? A fourth? How deep did this deception go? For now, John is desperately trying to locate his daughter, while I'm continuing with divorce proceedings against a wife who seems to have disappeared into thin air. My attorney has assured me that the divorce can still proceed, Even without Sarah's participation, though it may take longer. The money, the house, the material things, none of that matters compared to John's loss. I can rebuild my finances and my life. But he's missing his child. We've agreed to stay in touch and support each other through whatever comes next in this bizarre and painful journey. I never expected or wanted revenge against Sarah. I just wanted a clean break and the chance to rebuild my life. But sometimes the universe has its own sense of justice, and Sarah's web of lies appears to be collapsing around her. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and so much has happened that I hardly know where to begin. First, Sarah has been found along with John's daughter, Lily. They weren't on the run as we initially feared. They were staying at Sarah's parents' vacation cabin, about 3 hours from Phoenix. Sarah's parents had no idea about the situation and were under the impression that Sarah was simply visiting with her daughter during a break from work. The discovery happened in the most unexpected way. Sarah's mother, concerned that she hadn't heard from Sarah in several days, drove to the cabin to check on them, finding the situation strange. Sarah was supposedly on a work break, but had no laptop and seemed anxious. Her mother called Sarah's workplace, only to discover that Sarah had been fired nearly a month ago for suspected embezzlement. When confronted, Sarah broke down and confessed everything to her parents. Her mother, horrified by what she learned, immediately contacted John and told him where to find his daughter. John drove to the cabin that same day and with the help of local police who were called to keep the peace, was reunited with Lily. Sarah, realizing the game was up, didn't resist when John took Lily back to Phoenix. According to John, she seemed almost relieved that the deception was finally over. As for the embezzlement from her company? Yes. There was yet another layer to Sarah's deception. Apparently, she had been falsifying expense reports and pocketing the difference for at least 2 years. The company had been building a case against her for months before finally terminating her employment and is now pursuing criminal charges. So not only was Sarah stealing from me and from John, but she was also stealing from her employer. The total amount is still being determined, but preliminary estimates suggest it could be upwards of $50,000. 2 days after John retrieved Lily, I received a call from Sarah's father, a man I've always respected and gotten along with well. He was devastated and deeply apologetic, though none of this was his fault. He asked if he could come see me, and I agreed. When we met for coffee, he handed me an envelope containing $20,000 in cashier's checks. "It's not everything she took from you," he said, his eyes red-rimmed and weary, "but it's what her mother and I could pull together right now. We want to make this right, even if Sarah can't." I was stunned by their generosity and integrity. I initially tried to refuse, this wasn't their debt to pay, but her father insisted. He told me that he and Sarah's mother were horrified by what their daughter had done and felt morally obligated to make amends however they could. "We raised her better than this," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't know where we went wrong." I assured him that they hadn't gone wrong, that Sarah had made her own choices. We talked for hours about the situation, both of us trying to make sense of how someone could live such an elaborate life for so many years. Before he left, Sarah's father told me that she had checked herself into a residential mental health facility, claiming she needed help for compulsive lying and possible personality disorders. Whether this was a genuine attempt to get help or just another manipulation to gain sympathy before a criminal trial, I couldn't say. As for the divorce, my attorney filed for a default judgment since Sarah has still not responded to any of the divorce proceedings. With the evidence of financial and her admission of infidelity via her parents' testimony, the judge granted the divorce on terms very favorable to me. I'll keep the house and most of our assets, and there will be no alimony. Given the circumstances, John has filed for full custody of Lily, and given Sarah's current situation, it seems likely he'll get it. He sent me pictures of his daughter, a beautiful, happy toddler who fortunately seems unaffected by the recent turmoil. He's promised to keep me updated on their situation, and I've promised the same. Sarah's parents have maintained contact with both of us, determined to be supportive grandparents to Lily despite the difficult circumstances. They've also offered emotional support to me, which I deeply appreciate. They're good people caught in an impossible situation, and I hold no ill will toward them. As for me, I'm slowly rebuilding. The house feels empty, but also peaceful. I've started therapy to process the betrayal and to ensure I don't carry this baggage into future relationships. Friends have been incredibly supportive, inviting me over for dinner, checking in regularly, and providing the companionship I need during this transition. I've also rediscovered old hobbies that I had set aside during my marriage. Playing guitar, hiking, photography. These activities have been therapeutic, giving me something positive to focus on instead of dwelling on the past. The strangest part of all this is that I sometimes catch myself missing Sarah. Not the real Sarah, who was capable of such deception and cruelty, but the woman I thought I was married to. The person I loved didn't actually exist. And grieving someone who was never real feels surreal and confusing. But each day gets a little easier. Each day I reclaim a bit more of myself in my life. And each day I'm grateful that I discovered the truth, no matter how painful it was. Living in ignorance might have been more comfortable in the short term, but it wasn't really living at all. Update 3: 6 months have passed since my world turned upside down, and I'm writing this final update from a new home in a new city, having finally closed this chapter of my life. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. And as expected, the settlement was heavily in my favor, given Sarah's actions. The house sold quickly and I used my portion to buy a smaller place closer to my company's headquarters. A fresh start in a location without painful memories. John and I have stayed in touch and his situation with Lily has stabilized. He was granted full custody, with Sarah receiving limited supervised visitation rights once her legal issues are resolved. John has sent me photos of Lily's 3rd birthday party, and seeing her happy surrounded by friends and family brings me unexpected joy. Though I have no biological connection to her, knowing that she's safe and loved feels important to me. As for Sarah, her story took another unexpected turn. After 2 months in the mental health facility, she was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and pathological lying. Whether these diagnoses explain her behavior or not, I can't say. I'm not a mental health professional, but it does provide some framework for understanding the years of deception. Upon her release, Sarah faced the consequences of her workplace embezzlement. Rather than go to trial, she accepted a plea deal: restitution of the stolen funds, 2 years of probation and 1,000 hours of community service. Her professional reputation is in tatters and she'll likely never work in pharmaceuticals again. Sarah's parents have maintained their integrity throughout this ordeal. They continue to support Lily and John emotionally and financially, while encouraging Sarah to take responsibility for her actions and seek ongoing treatment. They occasionally reach out to check on me as well, which I appreciate. Sarah herself sent me a letter last month. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. I debated whether to read it, knowing it could reopen wounds that were finally starting to heal. In the end, curiosity won out. The letter contained what appeared to be a sincere apology. Sarah acknowledged the pain she caused and took full responsibility for her actions without making excuses. She explained that she was continuing with therapy and working to understand why she created such elaborate deceptions and the people who loved her. I didn't respond to the letter. Maybe someday I will, but for now, I'm focused on moving forward rather than looking back. I don't wish Sarah ill. In fact, I hope she gets the help she needs, but she's no longer a part of my life. As for me, I'm doing better than I could have imagined 6 months ago. The pain hasn't disappeared entirely, but it's no longer sharp and all-consuming. I've made new friends in my new city, reconnected with old ones who had drifted away during my marriage, and even started dating again, cautiously and with much more awareness of red flags. Work has been a positive distraction, and I recently received a promotion that's both challenging and rewarding. I've also started volunteering at a financial literacy program for young adults, using my professional skills to help others avoid financial pitfalls. The revenge I never asked for turned out to be the freedom to rediscover myself and build a more authentic life. Sarah's web of lies collapsed under its own weight, and justice came without me having to pursue it. If there's one lesson I've learned from all of this, it's the importance of trusting my instincts. There were small signs throughout our marriage. Inconsistencies in stories, unexplained absences, emotional distance that I chose to ignore because I couldn't imagine the person I loved being capable of such deception. I won't make that mistake again. But I also won't let this experience make me cynical or closed off. The vast majority of people are honest and genuine, and I refuse to let one person's actions corrupt my view of humanity as a whole. To anyone going through something similar, it gets better. The pain doesn't disappear overnight, but day by day, moment by moment, you rebuild. You find strength you didn't know you had. And eventually you realize that what felt like an ending was actually a beginning. A chance to create a life that's truly your own. Thank you to everyone who's followed my story and offered support along the way. Your kind words and encouragement have meant more than you know.